President Trump hitting back after the Supreme Court rejected his administration's efforts to end DACA, the Obama-era program that gave legal protections to young immigrants brought to the country illegally as children. This is Outnumbered, and I'm Melissa Francis. Here today is Harris Faulkner, host of Kennedy and the Fox Business Network Kennedy, syndicated radio host and Fox News contributor Leslie Marshall, and joining us today, Fox News contributor Guy Benson. He is host of the Guy Benson Radio Show, and he is outnumbered. Yeah, Leslie, what do you think about that?
That's right.
I mean, it does seem like they don't want to. It does seem like they just want to have the issue as a political issue as opposed to doing the work they've been elected to do.
Look, I agree with some of what Guy and Kennedy are saying. You know, you see the headlines. This is a big win for Dreamers, approximately 800,000 people. But they're still holding their breath to a degree until Congress acts. And I do think, sadly, and rightly so, Melissa, to your point, that, you know, this does become like, you know, political tennis between Democrats and Republicans. Right now, this is an election year, as we know. And what is the court saying? Look, you didn't give adequate and sufficient justification for why you want this gone. And the White House could come back and do that. They're unlikely to do that in an election year. And politically, it does hurt the president because immigration was a focal point of his domestic agenda. And again, November is a big election, but that still doesn't allow the 800 plus Dreamers are still waiting to exhale, if you will, with regard to this. This, again, just goes back and forth, strokes of pen, to Kennedy's point with executive power. Congress needs to take action to help all these individuals who are still in limbo to a degree.
Harris, I wonder.
President Trump is ramping up his attacks on John Bolton over the former National Security Advisor's upcoming book. The book details his time in the White House. Bolton's memoir claims the president was easily manipulated by foreign adversaries and was focused mainly on his re-election, among a list of other allegations. However, the president calls the book made up and told our Sean Hannity it also contains highly classified information. What? Leslie?
I'll tell you, when people say that John Bolton is lying, I don't think so. A lot of that stuff is already out there. A lot of people, especially my side of the aisle, do feel that the president falsifies things, do feel that he does personal attacks, loves flattery, and hates the press. But what really concerns me is, to Kennedy's point, John Bolton likes to be right. But does he like to do the right thing, or does he like money more? Obviously the latter, because the right thing, if you really believe, and you're stating that the president said to China and other foreign nations and leaders, look, I'll do this for you if you help me get reelected. That's the quid pro quo that Democrats were concerned about. That is what the impeachment inquiry started. And John Bolton is alleging that Democrats didn't dig deep enough, yet he wasn't willing to go forward and to testify. That, as an American, bothers me a great deal. And at the end of the day, I guess John Bolton has to look himself in the mirror and live with that. Politically, though, book sales are great, and you know, for John Bolton right now. And quite frankly, I really don't think this is going to help or hurt the president, because the people that love the president think John Bolton's lying, and the people that don't like him already have a copy of Bolton's book.
The Atlanta Police Department says a higher than usual number of police officers are calling out sick just before a change in shift. This coming after prosecutors announced charges in the fatal police shooting of Rayshard Brooks. Leslie, I'm curious from you, when you look at what happened right after George Floyd, there were, you know, allegations of you didn't charge hard enough, and then you saw a second-degree murder added to the third-degree murder. You know, there was some misnomer about, well, it's been upgraded. Actually, they just added to the charges, so the list got longer with second-degree murder on there. But in this case, as Guy's pointing out, and as many police officers have said, well, wait a minute, let's look at the whole thing. They're not exactly the same.
In Fulton County, where Atlanta is in Georgia, they really should have, the district attorney should have looked at what Keith Ellison did in Minneapolis. They followed the standard operating procedure, which is the officer is suspended, there's an investigation, and in the case in Minneapolis, after Mr. Floyd's death, charges were brought very speedily, even those people protesting did not feel it was that way. This was even quicker, and they didn't go by the book, in my opinion. Look, they suspend the officer, do the investigation, bring about charges, and like in Minneapolis, you can amend or add to those charges further down the road, because otherwise, you know, you have to give, if you're a district attorney, enough evidence that the jury is going to see what you want it to see and end up with a conviction. And speaking to politics, the district attorney in Fulton County, like in most cases in this country, is an elected official. So politics, sadly, is in play. And I also think, Harris, there's a lot of fear in DA's offices that if they don't get charges and get these cops off the street quickly, that there's going to be more violence, more unrest, more rioting, more looting, and then and that shouldn't enter into their decision, but I think it certainly does across the board. We've seen it in Minneapolis, and years ago we saw it in Los Angeles with riots here after Rodney King.
President Trump criticizing 2020 rival Joe Biden last night during his interview with Sean Hannity as his campaign ramps up calls for the presumptive Democratic nominee to get out on the campaign trail and ramp up his in-person events. Meantime, the Biden campaign launching its first major TV ad blitz of the general election today, a $15 million rollout targeting 6 key battleground states that President Trump won in 2016. Leslie, the basement strategy is working for Joe Biden if you believe the polls, which I don't, but regardless. But is he really going to be able to keep it up as the lockdown ends? Because it was easy to say before, that he's observing social distancing and you could go with the digital campaign, and it wasn't being contrasted with huge stadiums that were being filled by President Trump. So do you think he can keep up such a sequestered campaign as the country unlocks and goes back outside?
Well, Joe Biden hasn't been in the basement. He left the basement Memorial Day to lay a wreath at the grave of fallen veterans. He's also met with George Floyd's family. He spoke in Pennsylvania. He knelt down with protesters in Delaware. And those are just a few examples.
Will he have a rally?
And I would say that if all of that and the basement is hurting him, then that over $80 million that he got in campaign contributions in May certainly is helping. Or the $6 million in one day with Senator Elizabeth Warren from Massachusetts, or the $3.5 million in one day with Senator Kamala Harris from my state here in California. Look, I think that Joe Biden's strategy is working, and I think he's doing the right thing, because right now we're seeing a surge, as you know, in Texas, in Florida, and Arizona with COVID. And unlike the vice president talks about, a resurgence in the fall or winter being overblown, we don't know. Medical professionals don't know.
Okay.
Politicians don't know. So I think that Joe Biden is doing the right and the responsible thing, and he's obviously in those polls doing well. I know you don't believe them, but the money's coming in as well.
Frustrated business owners and people who live there say they are increasingly concerned about their safety in and around Seattle's Capitol Hill Occupied Protest Zone, or CHOP, as they like to call it. One person reportedly telling a local affiliate they feel like sitting ducks in the absence of police presence. Authorities say response times to 911 calls have ballooned to 3 times as long since police vacated the area. One person going as far as to say this.
We've been shell-shocked by the police, and now this, and these people are evil at night. They're horrible. I'd go almost to a homeless shelter right now just to be away from the violence.
Leslie, as you look at this, and I know everything is political, so you've got Democrats, Republicans, all right, but right down the middle are everybody in America who deserve to be able to go to their small business or get to their apartment, their home, their condo, their whatever it is, without being stopped to be able to pass the guards of the autonomous zone.
Look, I believe in the freedoms and the rights of all people in this now 3-block radius. It's interesting because that woman, my heart goes out to her, but that's very different than residents that we had in that zone. I'll call into my radio show, or a guest on my radio show the other day, who were saying that it's very different than what we're seeing, the violence that we're seeing portrayed. First, the police are going to respond to anything that is life-threatening, and second,
the police chief said that too.
They have gardens, they have homeless people that are coming there, and it's more like a hippie commune in a sense. That's what we're hearing from the people in that 3-block radius as of late.